Welcome back to the Political Pulse 2.0. Today we're tackling a complex issue. Is the problem with the Department of Education bloat, or is it society's unwillingness to address the root issue plaguing inner cities, poverty? This question echoes the findings of the 1968 Kerner Report, which I discussed in my recent video, The Kerner Report, Ignored: How Racist History's Lessons Echo in Modern America for Everyone. The report revealed the devastating consequences of government neglect and systemic inequality. The sentiments remain today, an unwillingness to confront poverty as the root cause of educational disparities. Let's start with the origins of the Department of Education. Created in 1979, it aimed to address disparities in public education, particularly in segregated and underfunded schools. Vivek Ramaswamy recently argued that this mission is no longer necessary, claiming that the federal role in education perpetuates inefficiency and waste. But does that tell the full story? On one hand, there's evidence of bloated spending. A report from the Government Accountability Office found that only a fraction of federal education funds directly benefits students. Administrative costs, compliance mandates, and bureaucratic inefficiencies absorb significant resources. Critics argue that this bloat fails to address the most pressing issues in struggling schools. But let's be clear, the larger issue isn't bureaucratic inefficiency, it's poverty. According to the National Center for Education Statistics, schools in low-income areas receive significantly less funding per student than schools in wealthier districts. This funding gap perpetuates disparities in teacher quality, classroom resources, and extracurricular opportunities. These aren't administrative problems, they're systemic inequities rooted in poverty. The Kerner Report warned us decades ago about this dynamic, stating that white institutions created, maintained, and condoned the ghetto. The same applies to our schools. When neighborhoods are impoverished, their schools reflect that reality. High poverty rates lead to lower academic achievement, higher dropout rates, and fewer pathways to success. Yet instead of addressing poverty, we continue to focus on bureaucratic fixes. That's not to say corruption and bloat don't play a role. Scandals like the misuse of funds in the Detroit public school system, where millions meant for students were misappropriated, show how deeply mismanagement can compound the problem. According to the Detroit News, over $10 million intended for educational improvements vanished into private hands, leaving students to suffer the consequences. So, we have two problems: structural poverty that cripples inner-city schools and inefficiency and corruption that siphon resources away from the students who need them most. And yet, the solutions are well known: investing in communities, providing equitable funding for schools, and holding administrators accountable. So why aren't these issues being addressed? Here's where the frustration sets in. We've studied the problems, we've identified the solutions, and yet we're stuck in a cycle of neglect. Why? Because addressing poverty means confronting uncomfortable truths about systemic inequality. It means allocating resources in ways that challenge the status quo, and that's something many political leaders are unwilling to do. In 1969, Nixon's benign neglect policies essentially told inner-city communities, "We see your problems, but we won't address them." Fast forward to today, and it feels like we're still living under the shadow of those policies. Politicians focus on short-term fixes or ideological battles over the Department of Education's role, while the root cause, poverty, remains ignored. The focus should be clear, equitable funding, anti-poverty programs, and accountability for how resources are used. States like New Jersey have demonstrated that increasing funding for low-income schools can lead to improved outcomes. The Education Law Center reported that investments in teacher training and student support programs led to higher graduation rates and college enrollment. Imagine if we scaled up those successes nationwide. Instead of cutting federal education spending or dismantling the Department of Education, why not reallocate resources to address the root cause, poverty? Why not hold administrators accountable while also giving schools the funding they need to succeed? At the end of the day, the question isn't whether the Department of Education is bloated. The real question is, are we willing to address the root issue, poverty? Until we do, our schools and communities will continue to struggle. What do you think? Can we overcome this cycle of neglect and focus on real solutions? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the Political Pulse 2.0. Together, let's keep this conversation alive.